Ambassador Kethvar slid his elongated fingers across the holographic display, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim colonies. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the nervous energy of a dozen species, all united in their shared concern about the newest addition to their civilized galaxy. The humans have established 17 new colonies in the past solar cycle, announced General Vorthak, his crystalline voice cutting through the ambient chatter. Their expansion rate is unprecedented. Unprecedented and aggressive, added Council Member Exciser, her tentacles writhing with agitation. My species required 3 centuries to achieve similar territorial coverage. Kethvar observed the assembly with growing unease. Representatives from the Zephyrian Empire, the Silicon Confederacy, the Hive Collective, and a dozen other major powers had gathered for this emergency session. Each species had conquered worlds, subjugated lesser civilizations, and carved out their domains through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. Yet here they sat, discussing a species that had barely achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Thorne of the Aquatic League, we should consider a preemptive strike. Contain their expansion before they become a threat. A uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. Kethvar watched as each representative exchanged glances, their various appendages fidgeting with what could only be described as nervousness. Has anyone here actually fought humans in direct combat? Asked Elder Zant, the oldest member of the council. More silence. Kethvar accessed his personal files, reviewing the classified reports that had been circulating through intelligence networks for months. The truth was more unsettling than any military threat the humans might pose. I have studied their conflict records extensively, he announced, drawing the attention of the assembly. The reason we avoid confronting humans isn't their technology, which remains inferior to most of ours. It isn't their numbers. They're still confined to a relatively small region of space. He paused, allowing the holographic display to shift to a series of historical human conflicts. The reason, he continued, is that humans are the only species we've encountered that seems to become more dangerous when they're losing. The display showed footage from human wars throughout their history battles, where outnumbered forces held impossible positions, retreats that turned into devastating counterattacks, and civilian populations that fought with improvised weapons against overwhelming odds. Every other species in this galaxy follows logical combat doctrine, Kethvar explained. When faced with superior force, they surrender or retreat. When resources are depleted, they negotiate. When their position becomes untenable, they accept defeat. General Vorthak leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. And humans? Humans, Kethvar replied, seem to interpret disadvantage as motivation. Our psychological analysts have identified a pattern they call escalating irrationality. The more desperate their situation becomes, the more unpredictable and dangerous their response is. The display shifted to show intelligence gathered from human colonies under threat. Where other species would have evacuated or negotiated, humans had begun converting agricultural equipment into weapons, training children in guerrilla tactics, and developing increasingly creative methods of causing damage to superior forces. I've reviewed 17 separate incidents where human forces were outnumbered 10 to 1 or greater, Kethvar continued. In 14 cases, they inflicted casualties at rates that our military computers classified as statistically impossible. They don't just fight, they seem to invent new ways to fight while fighting. Council member Exciser's tentacles had stopped writhing. Are you suggesting they're inherently superior warriors? No, Kethvar replied. I'm suggesting they don't seem to understand when they've lost. Our species have evolved past such primitive responses. We fight efficiently, calculate odds, make rational decisions about when to engage or withdraw. He gestured to another display showing human entertainment media. They create stories about impossible victories, celebrate historical defeats as inspiration, and teach their young that any problem can be solved with sufficient determination and creativity. It's completely illogical. Elder Xant's ancient voice creaked through the chamber. And this makes them dangerous how, exactly? Kethvar pulled up the final set of data projections from the Council's best strategic computers. Because when a species doesn't acknowledge conventional limitations, they don't respect conventional rules of engagement. Our wargames consistently predict that any extended conflict with humans would escalate beyond acceptable parameters. The projections showed human populations converting entire planets into fortress worlds, using industrial infrastructure for military production, and developing weapons that prioritize maximum damage over their own survival. They've proven capable of remarkable innovation under pressure, Kethvar concluded. And their cultural programming suggests they would rather destroy everything than accept subjugation. A long moment passed as the Council absorbed this information. So, our recommendation, General Vorthak said slowly, is to avoid conflict with a species because they might fight too hard. Our recommendation, Kethvar corrected, is to avoid conflict with a species that doesn't seem to understand the concept of acceptable losses. Every other civilization in this galaxy can be reasoned with, bribed, intimidated, or conquered through conventional means. Humans appear to operate outside these parameters. Ambassador Thorn's aquatic form rippled with what might have been laughter. We're afraid of them because they're too stubborn to know when they're beaten. Essentially, yes, Kethvar replied without humor. And stubborn species that refuse to follow logical military doctrine have a disturbing tendency to find ways to win fights they should lose. The council members exchanged glances again, this time with what looked like resignation. Motion to classify human space as a neutral zone, Elder Xant announced. All in favor of continued peaceful coexistence. The vote was unanimous. As the council dispersed, Kethvar remained behind, studying the human data one more time. Other species had evolved past their primitive fighting instincts, becoming civilized and predictable. Humans had somehow weaponized their refusal to evolve past theirs. It was, he reflected, probably the most terrifying military advantage any species could possess.